We're witnessing around the world two things. On the one hand, we're witnessing massive economic crisis, huge inequality, bankers lining their pockets by millions of unemployed, mansions alongside slums, billion-dollar jobs alongside poverty, huge trillions of dollars of wealth alongside people struggling to pay the rent from their low-paying jobs. But at the same time, we're seeing around the world resistance. We're seeing in country after country, in city after city, people standing up for a better world, people fighting for a world that puts people before profits, fighting for a world where it's not just the 1% of the super rich who get to have decent lives, but the rest of us as well. So we've seen that in Egypt, in Tunisia, right across the Middle East, people in Syria still battling away, people in Libya, you name it. And that movement has spread, of course, and inspired struggles all around the world, particularly in the United States, where on Wall Street thousands of people have been occupying Zuccotti Park, renamed Liberty Park. They're occupying that park to fight for a better world, to say we've had enough of the Wall Street bankers ruining our world. We've had enough of the corporate scum at the top of society dictating to the rest of us and destroying our economy, lining their own pockets, ballooning CEO packages and bonuses, while at the same time thousands of workers are thrown into unemployment. In America, the richest country in the world, 50 million people don't even have healthcare. 50 million people, more than double the population of Australia, in the richest country in the world, do not have healthcare. Well, that is a sick society, that is a sick system which has sick priorities, which only thinks that the interests of the 1% matter more than the interests of the 99% of the rest of us. That's the kind of inequality which has sparked the Occupy movement in the United States. We're seeing revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt. A little known fact is that America, the United States is actually more unequal economically than any of those countries in the Middle East. There is greater inequality in the United States than there is in countries like Tunisia and Egypt. And in the United States, they paper over that, of course, with a sham semblance of democracy. But really, when you look at America, there's no major difference between the parties, just like here in Australia, that the political establishment, the whole political establishment, exists to serve that 1% at the top of society. That's why all their policies are essentially identical. All around the world, we see the same thing, different parties elected, but all of them carry out the agenda of big business. Right across Europe as well, we see, of course, the economic crisis, and again, millions of people thrown into unemployment. In Spain, the unemployment rate is something like 25% now. For young people, the unemployment rate over 50% in Spain. But again, in Spain, in every other country, what do the governments do? They bailed out the very people who caused the economic crisis. The very people who for decades have been lining their pockets with risky investments, subprime housing investments, speculation, all the rest of it. The people who have brought the world to this state of economic misery have been bailed out to the tune of trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars have been given to the people who caused the economic crisis. Where is the bailout for the poor? Where is the bailout for the working class, for the unemployed? They don't get a bailout. What do they get? Austerity measures. They get cuts. They get cuts to social spending, cuts to wages, cuts to pensions, cuts to unemployment benefits, cuts to health and education spending, and mass sackings. Right across Europe, right across the United States, that is what the world has witnessed over the last 2 years. Bailouts for the rich, bailouts for the people who caused the economic crisis, while at the same time, austerity measures for the poor and the working class. Austerity for people who did not cause the economic crisis, austerity for people who are already struggling to make ends meet, while at the same time, bailouts for the rich. And that's why we have a sick world of mansions alongside poverty, of unemployment and homelessness, alongside huge and ballooning executive pay. The rich 1% in the world has actually gotten richer over the last 2 years. They've made even more money over the last 2 years, amongst the same time as everyone else is doing it tough. So they talk about shared sacrifice. There's been no shared sacrifice. The rich actually have gotten richer. And that's nothing new. If we look at the Great Depression in Australia, back in the early 1930s, the same thing happened then too, actually. The richest people during the Great Depression got richer then too. And now we're seeing a new Great Depression, an economic crisis around the world, an economic crisis with no end in sight. No end in sight. The bankers, the IMF, the world leaders who have been having endless meetings, they have no solution to this crisis. Their only solution they can think of is more austerity, more cuts and more cuts and more cuts, and bogus bailouts. They say they're bailing out Greece. They're not bailing out Greece. They're bailing out the German and the French banks who own all of Greece's debt. That's the only people they're bailing out. And at the same time, they demand more blood out of the Greek workers, even more cuts for the people of Greece who are already doing it incredibly tough. That's why we need to occupy here in Australia. That's why people are occupying around the world. And we need to show solidarity with that global movement. And it is a global movement because, let's face it, we're all in the same position. The 99% of people all around the world have very similar interests, and we have a common enemy. And that common enemy is the 1% of people, again, all around the world, making our lives a misery. The 1% who have lined their own pockets while the rest of us get even poorer and poorer and poorer and are working longer and longer and longer for less money. That's why people need to occupy Sydney tomorrow. It's kicking off 2:30 p.m. Martin Place. Hundreds, hopefully thousands of us will be descending on the financial centre of Sydney, just as people have descended on the financial centres of New York and of cities, hundreds of cities now across the United States and all across Europe. Of course, there are massive occupations that have